Hi everyone! It's great to see you again. Is everyone enjoying school? Are you enjoying school, Charlie?
Yeah! I'm enjoying school so much!
That's brilliant. I hope you're enjoying school as well. Have you got a new teacher this year, Charlie?
Yeah, and he's very nice.
Brilliant. Maybe you've got a new teacher as well. Do you get lots of homework? What about you, Charlie?
I've got loads more homework.
Yes, it's important that we learn not just in school, but at home as well. Today we're going to hear about a little boy who also went to school. He was born nearly 300 years ago in England.
What's his name?
His name is called John.
I've got a friend called John in my class.
Very good. Maybe you're watching today and you're called John, or you've got a friend called John. So let's listen and hear about John today.
John was sitting beside his mother. She was asking him questions from the Shorter Catechism. That's a little book that has 106 questions in it, and these questions are about God and about the Bible. She asked him the question, what is God? I wonder, do you know the answer to that question? John answered, and he said God is a spirit, and he explained about how God never changes, how he is all-powerful, how he lives forever, how he is so wise. There is no one like God. She then asked him the question, is there more than one God? John was able to answer, and he said there is only one God, the one true and the living God. That's the God that we read about in the Bible. John's mum said to him, that's really good. You'll have this whole catechism remembered before you're even 6. Every morning, John and his mum would go through the Shorter Catechism. She would ask him these questions and he would give her the answers. She then asked him the question, what is the work of creation? John answered and said that God had created everything in 6 days. He created everything just by speaking. He created it out of nothing. God said that everything he made was good. Suddenly, John's mum began to cough. She was always coughing, but usually they got past question 20 before his mum would start to cough. On this day, they'd only got to question 9, and she was coughing, and she jumped up from the bed and she ran into another room because her coughing was getting louder. John didn't mind. He didn't mind having a little break from trying to remember the answers to the questions of the catechism. John was thinking of a question of his own. When his mum came back in and sat beside him, John asked this question. What day did God create the seas? Do you know the answer to that question? John's mum answered and she said the seas were created on the 3rd day. God created everything in 6 days, but on the 3rd day he created the seas. Which sea is Father on right now? John asked his mum. Well, he sails on most of the seas. I'm just not quite sure. I know last month they were on the Mediterranean Sea. It had been over a year since John and his mother had seen their father. His father was the captain of a merchant ship. He would spend months and months away at sea, and John didn't really see him much at all. Do you think will Father ever take me on a sailing voyage? John asked his mum. John, you've got so many questions, she said. Let's just thank the Lord that you have your feet on dry ground. Be content where you are. Now, where were we? What question are we on now? Oh, that's right, it's question 10. Thoughts of the sea were never far from John's mind. He lived in a little village called Wapping that was on the banks of the River Thames in England. This little village was always full of sea captains and sailors and dock workers. It was a busy little place as people loaded stuff onto ships and took stuff off ships. This was also the place where John's mum took him to church every Sunday. The pastor of this church was called Dr. Jennings, and he was usually there every Sunday, but there was one Sunday that he wasn't there, and instead a man came and his name was Dr. Isaac Watts. This man came and he preached from the Bible and he taught the people about God. But not only that, this man wrote hymns. Some of them are sang in church today. Maybe you've heard of these hymns before. When I Survey the Wondrous Cross is one of them. And another one is Joy to the World. That's a song that we sing at Christmas. But there was another song that John liked to sing that this man had written. It is called I Sing the Mighty Power of God. You listen carefully as I read out the words to you. It says, I sing the mighty power of God that made the mountains rise, that spread the flowing seas abroad and built the lofty skies. John loved this song, and on his way home from church he would often sing that song. As he was walking home from church that day, when Dr. Isaac Watts had come to visit, he was walking home with his mum, and his mum began to cough. And John noticed that lately his mum was just coughing more and more. She really didn't seem to be that well. When she was finally able to speak, she said to him, John, I've got something to tell you. The doctor said that I need to go to a place to get better. I need to stay somewhere beside the sea. He said that the sea air will help my coughing. So I'll be going a while to my cousin's house. Do you mean the Catlets, mother? John said. I've always wanted to go there and visit them. When are we going to go? John's mum shook her head. And she said, well, I'm going, John, but you're not. You're going to stay here with the Marston family from church. But I'll be back very soon. I'll be back whenever I get better. John's mother went to the sea coast to stay with her cousins. But it wasn't a short visit. She was gone for months and months and months. And John was really missing her. John didn't mind staying with his family from church, but it just wasn't the same. One day in July, Mrs. Marston called him into the house. She said to him, John, there's someone here to see you. It was Dr. Jennings from church. He sat on the sofa and he chatted to John, but Dr. Jennings had a serious look on his face. Then Dr. Jennings paused and he said, John, there's something that I need to tell you. Your mother has passed away. John couldn't believe what he was hearing. The pastor put his hand on John's shoulder to comfort him, and John just cried and cried and cried. His mother had died. He was so upset. Pastor Jennings spoke to John, and he said, I know this is very hard. I know that you may not understand yet, but God is in control. God is still good, and he's still full of grace, and he is working out his great plans and purposes. And even in this, we must trust him. John stayed with the Marston family through to the next year, until his father came home from his voyage. At first, John thought that everything would be so much better, that finally he would be able to spend time with his father. He hadn't seen him for so long. But his father came with the news that he was actually getting married again, that he would have a new wife, and that John was going to go to boarding school. I wonder, do you know what a boarding school is? A boarding school is a school where the pupils stay all week, and sometimes they go home at the weekends, and sometimes they don't. Well, John went to boarding school, and he missed his family, and he felt as if at times there was no one that really cared about him, as if he'd been forgotten. John's father then had 3 more children with his new wife, and his father was so busy with his younger brothers and sisters that it seemed that he'd just forgotten all about John. One day, John's father made a surprising announcement. John, you're not going back to boarding school. Instead, you're coming with me on my next voyage. John couldn't believe what he was hearing. He was actually going to go on a sea voyage with his father, the captain. This was going to be really exciting. A few weeks later, John was boarding the ship and he had his luggage with him, and he was just in awe of everything. This ship was so huge, and there were so many people who worked on this ship and running around on the deck. John felt really overwhelmed and totally out of his depth. What would he be doing here on this ship? Peering up at the top mast, John could notice someone who was tying down a sail. Then he heard a voice, and this voice shouted at him, and he said, if you keep staring up there like that, you're going to be a target for the seagulls. The voice came from a young sailor who was maybe 3 or 4 years older than John. He said, my name's Bill Higgins. He said to him, I can see from the look of you that you've never been on a ship before. John said to him, not really. This is the first time that my father has ever taken me on one of his sea voyages. Your father? Bill said. Do you mean to say that your father is the captain? Captain Newton? Oh, I better behave myself, Bill said. And he looked at John and he laughed. John laughed. It was good to be able to chat to Bill. It was good that someone was paying him some attention for a change. Bill said to him, "Come on, and I'll show you round the rest of this big ship." And off they went to look round the rest of the ship. John and Bill became really good friends. And even though everything was ready on the ship to set sail, they couldn't set sail because of the poor weather. And so the ship remained in the dock for many weeks. John was able to spend more time than ever with his father, but it always seemed that his father was just too busy getting ready to set sail on this next voyage. "Listen here, John," Bill said to him one day. He was whispering. "The HMS Victory, the big warship, has pulled in down the river. It's a huge ship and it's got loads of guns on it. Why don't we head down on Sunday afternoon and go and see this ship?" Bill glanced from side to side and he continued, "Me and some of the other fellas are going to go down. You meet us down there at the harbour." And Bill continued to whisper to him the final details of when and where they would meet. John knew that his father wouldn't approve, but he planned to go and meet Bill and the others anyway. Sure, his father would never notice if he was gone. He hardly paid any attention to him anyway. John went to church on Sunday morning, and Dr. Jennings preached, and he preached longer than he normally would. John was dying to get out, because he wanted to go down and meet Bill and the other boys. He knew he was going to be late, and as soon as church was over, he ran out through the door. He got on his horse, and he galloped as fast as he could down to the shore. When he got there, he realised that he was too late. Bill and the other lads were in a boat, and they'd already begun to sail towards the HMS Victory. John slid down from the saddle and he bit his lip in frustration. Why could they not have just waited for him a little while longer? Surely they would have known that he was coming. Now he had missed his opportunity to see this warship. John was really disappointed. As John stood there grumbling, it was interrupted by cries of help. "Help! Help!" The cries were coming from the boat. It was Bill. Bill and the other lads were in big trouble. The small boat that they were all in was lurching, and then it capsized. It tipped over. Bill and the boys were struggling to swim to safety. But Bill wasn't a great swimmer. John wasn't a great swimmer either, and he realised that he was too far away to be able to rescue them. There was no way that he could go to the little boat and rescue all of them. It was impossible. By the time a rescue boat reached them, it was too late. Bill and the other lads had all drowned. John was numb with shock. He just couldn't believe it. A few weeks later, John stood on the ship with his father. Finally, the weather had cleared, and the boat was able to leave the harbour. It was now heading towards the North Sea. As John stood there looking into the water, looking at the waves and waves of water, he looked back on that day when Bill and his friends drowned in the water. He could see that HMS ship away off in the distance, and it didn't look like a big ship. It looked very small, and as they moved further out into the sea, it got smaller and smaller. John really missed Bill, and he really missed his friend. And that day he realised that it could have been him. He could have drowned. He had just missed that boat because he was late. But if he had been early, he too would have drowned. While John didn't think much about God, he realised that God had his hand on his life, that it was only by God's grace that he himself had not drowned. Surrounded by the sound of the waves, he whispered a prayer. "Thank you, Lord, that I didn't drown. I don't know why I was saved, but thank you. From now on, I promise to live a life that pleases you." Would John really be able to do this? What was going to happen in his life? You'll have to come back to find out what happens next to John on this sea voyage.
He was on such a big ship, and he was going to a really far away place.
That's right, Charlie. You listened well, didn't you? Maybe you've been on a ship before. Maybe you were going to a different country. That was just the first of many adventures that John had on a big ship. Make sure you come back and watch the next episode to find out more of these adventures.
Bye!
Bye!